Hello everyone. In this video we are going to talk about two important topics about variables. One is static variables, the other one is scope of the variables and variable hiding. So, static variables are something like persistent variables that you had in MATLAB that they are created when you are calling a function, but unlike the variables that are local to a function, if you call that function again, those variables are not going to basically be recreated again at the starting value, and they keep their value and their value can be increased. So for example, you can use them to see how many times you have called the function. Or if you're writing an application and that function belongs to an app, every time that you pushed on a button, this function is going to be called and this number is going to increase, let's say one at a time. So that is going to tell you how many times you have pushed a button, something like that, right? And the important thing about this static or what we call in MATLAB persistent variable, in C++ we call it static variables, is when you declare them, the space for them allocated for the entire lifetime of the program, not just for one time that you call the program. So as long as that program is there and you're calling it, the space for it is going to be the same space and it's not going to be overwritten. So it's going to preserve the value it has. The way that you create a static variable in a function is you start with the keyword static. So here you see I start this count as 0, and every time I show the value of 0 count, and then I add 1 to the count. So every time you call this demo function, it shows the current value of the count and it adds 1 to it. And the thing is, if you keep doing it, like here in this for loop, it is not going to overwrite it by resetting the count to 0 every time. It just does it one time. The first time you call it, count becomes 0. Then it shows that 0 and then count becomes 1, and then it keeps going up from that point. So when you call it the second time, this part is not going to be running again. Only these two parts will run. So let me show you that here. So you see here I ran the demo function 5 times and I started at 0 and added it 1 at a time until I get to 4. And when I becomes less than 5, I stopped. So when I was 4, I stopped. Therefore, you can see a count of 4 here and 5 times calling the function, right? So that's a static variable. If you need a variable in a function to preserve its value, you can call it static. The other topic that is interesting I wanted to talk about is the scope of the variables, whether they are in a scope or not, and also basically let me just call it scope, and then variable hiding. So here I have a block of commands that could be like a function, right? Now here these are not a function, but these are a block of commands that are going to be one entity together. And before I start this block of commands, I declare two variables. One is pi, the other one is a. Now here you see I create pi and I show the pi, and then I create the integer value of 6. So now when I go inside this block, which as I said acts like a function, I declare this local variable e. The scope of this variable e is only within this block of commands, or if it was a function, it was only within this function. It's a local variable. While this pi or this a that were defined before this block, they are like a global variable to this block. They can be accessed from inside this block. Look, inside this block, I can say go ahead and show pi, and it does it without any problem. Why? Because I declared pi before I start this block. I declared pi ahead of time. So now pi is like a global variable to this block, and it can be accessed from it, right? I can access it from here. You might say, can you change it? Well, let's find out. So I'm gonna go ahead and change pi to 3.1415, right? and then I get out of here, and then I call the pi again, see if from inside this block I could what? I could change the value of pi or not, right? So let me go ahead and run this for you. You see, before I go to the block, the value was 3.14. When I went into the block, I can show that value, I can access it, and more importantly, I could alter it. I could alter this global variable from inside the block, and you see at the end, when I call this, the value has changed, right? So when a variable acts like a global to a block or function, it can be accessed from within and changed. On the other hand, this variable e that I defined inside the block, this Euler number, if outside the block I say, hey, show me the value of e, by the way. I'm not even want to change it, I just want to show it. Hey, show me this value of e, right? See what it does. You see, it gives you an error. It says, hey, e was declared inside this block. It was not declared in this scope, which is outside the block. It was declared inside this block, not outside it. So it is just a local variable to this block. You cannot from outside see it, you cannot change it, you cannot do anything to it, right? You see? So that is the difference between something that acts global to a block or something that acts a local to a block, and how we can access them and not. And to make it even more interesting for you, here I have a variable a. One I declare outside, one I declared inside. Look at the difference here. This a, I call it a number 1, I declare it outside the block and I call it 6. When I go inside the block, I change it to 4. So I change the value of a1 and I change it to 4. Then inside this block, I define a new a and give it 3. And guess what? This a and this one are different. This is the local variable, this is the global variable. So I can call them a1 and a2. At this moment, there are two a's in the memory, a global one and a local one. And when here I change this a back to 6, I change this a, but this block is completely what? Changing its own local variable, and the global variable that was declared outside becomes hidden, right? So if I change it to 5, not 6, what happens here? Which one of these two a's becomes 5 here? In line 24, which one becomes 5? It's the second one. It's this local one that becomes 5. That global one does not change. Right now we say that global one is hidden. On the other hand, if I get out of the block and change a to 15, now which one is changing? Since I'm out of the block, now I'm changing this global a to 15. That local that I call 3 and then I change it to 5, that is gonna stay at 5. So we say that a is what? Hidden, right? So you see, a variable, if has the same name in global and local, you can only change one of them at a time. Either the global one, you change it if you're outside and the local one stays hidden, or the local one changes and the global one stays hidden if you are inside that block, right? So you see all of these interesting things that you can do with what? With global and basically local variables to a function or to a block of commands that you put inside braces. So hopefully this video was useful to you and you learn about the scopes of the variables and static variables. And I will see you in my next video. Thank you.